doctor in San Francisco, and consequently he was born over there. My sister she's about 4 years younger than me. She was born here in Suisun. What my father's occupation was, he was handling gold shipments from the mines in Nevada and taking them down to the San Francisco Mint, San Francisco. At the time of the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, he was on a train in his car going between Suisun and Benicia. For many years down through that area down there was what they called a sink. It was very very bad roadbed for the trains. They hauled trainloads of rocks, gravel, and whatnot, and filled down there, but still they have to take it easy going across there. I remember distinctly the train would just crawl across there for a stretch of about 2 miles. Just barely crawl across there. On the day of the earthquake, my father was standing in the door of the express car, and all of a sudden the train gave a lurch and it threw him right out in the tulies alongside the car crash. They couldn't figure out they thought it was just the sink had shifted on the roadbed had shifted or something. They didn't realize what had happened until they got to Benicia. When it got down there, there was a crack about that wide in the whole length of the roadbed there. That wide in the whole length of the roadbed there. Then that's when they found out that San Francisco earthquake had taken place. In those years, the trains crossed the Carquinez Straits on 2 gigantic ferries, 2 of the largest ferries were ever built in the world. One of them was named Solano, the other was named Contra Costa. Each one of them would hold a full train. They just run the cars in on the train, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, and in layers. They got down to Oakland, and my mother had an express wagon, horse and wagon, and he was trying to get on the ferry to go over to San Francisco, and they weren't going to let him. And he said, "Yes, you are going to let me. I got a shipment of gold here." And he drove the thing on the ferry, and they couldn't stop him. He got over there, and you can have many tales about what conditions were at that time after the earthquake and the fire. The fire was the worst. Okay, Suisun, the Suisun area, at that time and during my young days, was more oriented toward railroad. It was not a division point at that time. The main division point for up in this area was in Roseville, but there was constantly shifting and switching going on down there. There were more constantly shifting and switching going on down there. There were more tracks, many more tracks down in there in the area below the present Southern Pacific Depot. There were lots of tracks down there, and there's freight cars were shifting them back and forth all night long. There were many railroad people lived in Suisun at that time when I was a kid. One of the happiest things we always remember about the railroaders was on New Year's Eve. They would fire up a couple of boilers there in the roundhouse down there on Cordelia Road, and at 12 o'clock they'd tie down the whistles, and they'd let them go until the steam was all gone. That'd go on for, about an hour, I guess, before the steam was all gone. That was something to look forward to. You asked about transportation. Well, in those years, the main transportation was the railroad. The only way you could get anything in any hurry at all would be by railroad, by Wells Fargo Express, coming as shipping on a regular train in the area. Other than that, you would have to wait for freight And that took many days sometimes before they'd fix up a whole trainload of stuff and drop something off at the freight depot here. At that time, the freight depot was about 200 yards beyond the present. Finishing up about my time in childhood, they used to have much boat traffic on the slough going down and hauling freight and material and stuff up from the Bay Area back up to unload at Suisun. That had pretty much tapered down by the time I got up, to probably starting high school, or even before that. Yeah, even before that. Maybe I was about in the 6th grade, something like that. We used to swim down there all the time. There was a great big warehouse down there about where, do any of you know where the Hunter Boat Works used to be in Suisun? What's the name of the guy's got the big boat place down there in Suisun?
Paul's Boat Harbor? And
yeah, boat place down there in Suisun.
Paul's Boat Harbor? And
yeah.
Well, was it by where the Pioneer Skateway?
This big warehouse was built partly over the slough on pilings, and a great part of it on land. It was over a block long, and it had car tracks that ran up into the very center of it. They had great big doors on the far end of it, and trains, the electric railway that used to run right down through the main street in Suisun. Came in through Fairfield and right down the main street in Suisun, and it could go and switch down there on the off side of that warehouse, and then bring material or whatever they hauled right up into the very center of the warehouse, and floors in the warehouse were the same level as the doors in the cars. So all they had to do was drop a steel plank deal there and unload. That had pretty much stopped. I don't remember, but very, very few times that I ever saw them hauling stuff in or out of there. And we swam.
Maybe the skating rink there, Pioneer skating rink?
No, that was this
way. That
way
was farther down. Okay.
Inland and this way farther.
Okay.
At that time also, do you folks know where Grizzly Island is?
Yeah.
Okay. At that time, those people that lived on Grizzly Island had no transportation other than boats. They'd get groceries and things. They had to come up in their boats up to Suisun to get them. There were two main grocery stores there, B&L Wing and Hooper and Mayfield. And they sold a lot of material down there. There were two old Greek, one of them was the Poseidon, the other was the Barbera. They used to do a lot of that hauling. In fact, I've made many trips with old Captain Barbera myself when I was kind of footloose and fancy-free when I was about 12 years old. We had family trouble, and I kind of vacated. We had family trouble, and I kind of vacated the premises a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. They used to make many trips over into the Delta country for potatoes, watermelons, other different kinds of mellows, and other different kinds of mellows, and then they haul grain and crops from Grizzly Island up to unload at Suisun, at the wharfs there in Suisun. Old Captain Barbera was a pretty fine old man. He was, those boats were about, as I recall now, they were about 40 feet long, very heavy plank boats. They were regular freight boats, and an old pop engine in them. They weren't much for speed, but they were pretty stout. I remember one occasion I went with him to Port Costa after a load of duck feed in sacks, and it was very quiet going across the bay on the way across, but we got a load, and it was really loaded. The decks were just full of that. In those years, the gun clubs could feed ducks to entice them in. They can't do that anymore. That's against the law. But they used to scatter that stuff out and attract them in. Yeah, they killed lots of ducks. But when we came back across with that load on, the wind had come up, and I was pretty shaky by the time we got back across the Carquinez Straits. That kind of scared me a bit, but I had many good trips with that man. He used to take weekly trips down into the different ranches around, take mail, groceries, or whatever shipments those people had ordered in. He would haul them on down there. And my particular job was to keep track of the mail, see that it went to the right place. I was just about 12 years old. I wasn't much on working. But I had many enjoyable trips with him over on the Sacramento Delta, and got a load of sacks of potatoes. And that was an all-night deal. I slept out on the deck that night, and they were all Chinese people over there at that time. Funny how the change that has come about in agriculture too. There's been different peoples, different races. Once it was Chinese, then it was Filipinos, and Japanese, Chinese again. And it's funny. Anyway, that was a kind of a scary deal to me. I didn't trust those. At that time, the Chinese still had pigtails. Did you know that? The Chinese used to wear pigtails. Did you know that? The Chinese used to wear pigtails. And the one thing that they dreaded is anybody ever cut one of those off, they were disgraced from there on out. That was it. All right, that's so much for that type of transportation. Truck traffic and passenger traffic, car traffic was not much at that time. It was an event to go to San Francisco or Oakland or go to Sacramento. You know, nowadays that's nothing. 45 minutes you're there. We'd go on a train and end up on a ferry across the bay from Oakland to San Francisco, and my doctor uncle lived way out on Union Street in San Francisco, which looked down on the gate. And I remember I was sitting up there in that upstairs room there. They had a big window up there, beautiful view from there. And I saw the great white fleet come in under the Golden Gate and come in on San Francisco Bay. That was something in those days.
Maybe anybody know, not
They made
familiar
a
with it?
worldwide trip.
Well, you explain to the students what the Great White Fleet was. I don't think they're familiar.
It was the first armored battle fleet the United States ever had, other than those old wooden ships. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was led at the time by the battleship Oregon. But they came in and they were all painted white. It was a beautiful scene. Also at that time, the Panama Pacific International Exposition was being held. That was in 1915. And it was really being held. That was in 1915. And it was really a beautiful sight to look out there over that same area, what is now the marina and everything, and see those buildings that they built, the Tower of Jewels, some of those beautiful buildings. One building is still left from that exposition.
Palace of Fine Arts?
What do they call it? Palace of Fine Arts. That's still down there. That was one of the main attractions of the fair at that time.
People have been to the Exploratorium? The Exploratorium's held in the Palace of Fine Arts now.
Yeah, that was a World's Fair, just the same as later ones that we had done. But transportation was not too much. The old Lincoln Highway used to come in Fairfield on Texas Street, turn at the courthouse, and go down through on Texas Street, turn at the courthouse, and go down through Suisun to Cordelia Road, right out Cordelia Road, over through Cordelia, over Jameson Canyon, and over to the Napa Y, which the road is still there now. That road is. But later, which the road is still there now, that road is. But later, things that happened, I don't know, I think that changing the highway hurt Suisun more than anything. They finally got the road fixed out here, and it took them a long time to get that done. Then it became Highway 40.
So it went straight out Texas Street
Yeah,
to Rockville
that's right.
Road and missed Suisun then.
Fairfield at that time was about 8 blocks east and west, and about that was just a dirt road. It was a bog. You couldn't get on it at all. Pennsylvania Avenue. I've seen Lou Pierce drive cattle down through there from the Pierce Ranch, where Rancho Solano is now, at winter time, and the whole thing was mud all the way through. It hit a little pavement here, and the whole thing was mud all the way through. It hit a little pavement here in town, but more mud on down. That was the last actual real cattle ranch in Solano County, where they bred their own cattle there. Most of these cattlemen now import year-old feeders in and fatten them up and then sell them. They had a full 300 to 500 head of brood cows out there always, and they raised their own calves and brought them up. They had regular calves and brought them up. They had regular cowboys. They had blacksmith deal. They had the whole setup out there with a real operating cattle ranch.
Wasn't Lewis Pierce
I might
pretty?
tell you that, huh?
I was just going to ask, wasn't Lewis Pierce pretty young when he started all that?
Lewis Pierce was, and his brother had come out here from Massachusetts way back when. They had sons that both operated bakeries, believe it or not, in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. Lewis Pierce, the first, and his brother, William Pierce, inherited all this area, the ranch, the fruit area out here, and the cattle ranches. That they extended clear over to, Travis Air Force Base, and north of Travis Air Force Base. All the hills, the whole thing. Thousands and thousands of acres. Lewis decided that he would rather go into the cattle business, and William Pierce wanted to go into the fruit business. Many thousands of head of cattle, thousands of head of sheep. They even operated a butcher wagon all through the area around here so people could have fairly fresh meat around. And he really did a job. Myself, they've had so much argument about this school out here at Rancho Solano. I think it should have been named after him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. So much for transportation. I don't know what else to tell you about that. Maybe we'll talk about the situation between Suisun and Fairfield. We'll talk about the situation between Suisun and Fairfield. When I was a child, a long time ago, I'm 81, I remember sitting in Miss Comey's first or second grade class, I don't remember which, when Teddy Roosevelt pushed the telegraph button to open the Panama Canal. We had to remain silent there for 1 minute while he did that. Really, that was a big deal.
Yeah. What date?
Do
you remember the date when that was?
That was August the 14th, I think, in 1914.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
You guys can't remember what we did yesterday.
You
huh?
want to know about teachers? Some of you want to know
Yeah.
about teachers. Did I like my teachers? Yes, all of them. Even the principal. He whipped me a couple of times, but that's all right. I liked him just the same. I had it coming. Mr. Finney was about
Mr. Finney.
6'6", and he's left-handed, And in his office there in the closet, he had a belt there, was about that long. And in his office there in the closet, he had a belt there, was about that long, about that wide, and about so thick, and he'd double that up, and he'd catch you with one hand and raise you off the floor, and he started at the heels and worked to the back of your neck. You knew you'd been someplace, but, and you know it's funny, the echo stayed from there for quite a long time, but, and you know it's funny, the echo stayed from there for quite a long time afterwards. Yeah, but, yes, I liked all my teachers in elementary school. At the time I was ready to get out of, the year before we had a breakup in our family. I won't go into that too far, but I couldn't understand it, and I was kind of a lost soul there for several years. I was pretty much on my own. And nobody cared much whether I took books home or I had learned my taught. Many years later, in 1941, Judge W.T. O'Donnell, judge of the Superior Court here at that time, he was the only judge of the Superior Court. Now they got about 8. He was a pretty gruff old man. They got about 8. He was a pretty gruff old man, but very severe and very fair too. He called me and wanted to know if I would be interested in going to work in the Solano County Probation Office. And I thought, me? And I thought, me? I said, well, Judge, I have to think about that. I'd like to come and talk to you about it. Okay, fine. He says, you talk it over with your wife. And it was an opportunity, yes, because I'd been running a service station, and things weren't too good right about that time. So the wife and I talked it over, and she said, I think you always like to work with kids, which I have, and go up and see him. So I went up and talked to him. I want to tell you something. You know that when I was a child, I hated you. I hated you because you gave my mother and father divorce. That's all I could think, you know, that he was responsible for my mother and father divorcing. And he said, well, there you are. He said, well, there you are. He says, there's one of the examples of what's happened on a divorce case, right there. It hits the children. I never forgot that. He appreciated that, me telling him that. But I did. I hated him. I couldn't see that at all. Where did we get off of transportation?
We got it. Now.
I've got it.
Yeah. Get into probation.
Well,
Didn't.
after I got out of high school, I spent a year and a few months up at the University of Nevada. Things got bad at home as far as finances is concerned, and I had to leave and come home and go to work for my father. He had a trucking business in Suisun. At that time, a lot of things were hauled by truck. That had started several years before. In those days, the truck driver was not only just a truck driver. He did the loading and unloading piece by piece. We didn't have any forklifts or anything to lift a big load on the truck. We had to do it ourselves. It was interesting. We used to from the Delta area into Hunt Brothers Cannery, which is right off the end of where the overpass drops into Suisun. Right there where that road turns, it goes right down into the main street in Suisun. Hunt Brothers Cannery was right there. Years before that, it was what was known as a Winters Canning Company. Before that, it was what was known as a Winters Canning Company. They used to, under the Winters Canning Company, used to can lots of things from the area. Spinach, asparagus, tomatoes, all different kinds of fruit. It was a payroll for quite a few people here in the town. Hunt Brothers payroll for quite a few people here in the town. Hunt Brothers took it over, and they only went to asparagus in the early part of the year, and then late in the fall they went to they'd haul in clean peaches from up in the Yuba City Basin up there, and can basin up there, and can them. That was it. That was it. Gradually, they got rid of the peach business, and finally they closed off altogether. They have a big concern in Hayward, and this was more of a branch back. They used to transfer stuff back and forth between the two. Those were quite some days. I worked for Dad till 1932, and I took over a little Union service station. It was down across where Pennsylvania Avenue crosses. But this was just a little box affair there with a concrete pad out there with a hoist on it, and everything was out in the open. There was no to work in the wintertime was no good. But I started to operate that for about a year, and then the most wonderful person I've ever known in my life, my wife. How she's put up with me all these years, I don't know. We've been married 76 or 56 years, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Anyway, for anything. Anyway, during years after I had the Union Station, then Union Oil Company and Standard Oil Company and Shell Oil Company had their own distributing plants in the area. Union Oil and Standard Oil were down on Cordelia Road, where Pennsylvania Avenue meets it down there. The two buildings now down there. One operates as a plumbing concern, and the other, I don't know, it's a rental for trailers or something. But I got the job driving truck, delivering gas to farmers and wherever, service stations, wherever, gasoline, oil product, $100 a month, 6 days a week. Time can see to can't see. You know what that means? From sun up to dark. See to can't see. You know what that means? From sun up to dark. There was no 8 hours a day, no 40 hours a week. It was get the job done. That's the way everything was in those days. Same way with my dad. When I worked for my dad, we were making $5 a day, $5 a day, $5 a day, $5 a day, driving trucks, the same kind of hours. But of course, in those days, $5 would buy something. It won't now. No. When my wife and I were first married, and I had this station there, you believe it, and I'd give her $5 out of the till, and she'd buy our groceries for a week. You could put it in all one bag now for $5. Things were much different, much different. This was during the very poorest of the Depression. Was pretty bad. I had operated, after I got out of the probation office, I transferred into the sheriff's office for 2 years. And I got just a little bit fed up with everybody I talked to was in trouble. Just a little bit fed up with everybody I talked to was in trouble. Just a little bit fed up, either drunk or in trouble of some kind. It kind of gets to you after a while, and I decided there's got to be something better than this. So I went back to my first love as far as working was concerned. I started an auto repair facility in the west wing of the Suisun Fire Protection District building that they had just completed. They let me operate there if I could take care of their trucks and make sure of that deal, which was a good deal. I put in lots of time on their trucks. I didn't have to pay any rent, but I paid through the nose. But anyway, during the course of that time, I built my own building on the end of our property. It's still there. It's a Baselite building, 525 Taylor Street. John Westner, 525 Taylor Street. John Westner operates it now. I built that and moved into it in 1955. It took me 2 years to get it built at that time, but I got it done.
It was still over there operating, right?
Yeah.
Taylor
it was,
Street.
It was,
Still over there operating, right?
Yeah.
Taylor
it was,
Street.
It was a tough deal. In between times, I'd picked up TB. I was quite a fireman at that time during those years, and it finally got to me. The bug got in my lungs, and I had to go to bed for about 3 months. But I got it licked, and I went back to work again, and been fine ever since.
Where now?
Well, that was quite an experience. I didn't believe it, but it was there.
Now, you went. Wasn't your uncle in San Francisco that helped diagnose it?
The garage, and I coughed up something that was blood in it, and one morning, and I thought that's funny, and I raised something more, and there was more blood. I thought that's awful. First, I went down to the health center, and they X-rayed me, and said, well, we'll let you know in about 3 days. She called me that afternoon and said, there's something definitely the matter with your left lung. She said, you better see your doctor immediately. Well, I went to my doctor that night, and they X-rayed me and fussed around for about an hour. And Dr. Smith was here at that experience with this stuff. He said, you got it or you had it, one or the other. And I said, what? He said, TB. I said, you're nuts. No. He said, you have. I said, okay. So they got the word down to my uncle in San Francisco, the doctor. This is this. Okay. So he wanted to know if I could go to work late in the day and quit early in the day and spend the rest of the time in bed. And I said, no, I can't operate. I said, what's the best to do? And he said, bed rest. I said, okay, that's what it's going to be. So I went to bed. I stayed there for 3 months and got it licked.
No, where did you go to bed?
Huh?
Where'd you go to bed? No, where did you go to bed?
Huh?
Where'd you go to bed?
In the back room of our garage.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had that fixed in a, they call them a granny deal now. But, my son slept in there for a long time while he was in high school. And the daughters were taking up the other rooms.
So he, Mr. Oliver.
And the daughters were taking up the other rooms.
So he, Mr. Oliver was out back. I guess it was pretty boring sitting in that room for 3 months.
That was quite an experience, but that's. I have 2 daughters and had 1 son who graduated all from Armijo. Son, Bob, I think he was the first football player from Armijo that ever made good in a major college. He played 4 years for University of California under old Pappy Waldorf. After his second year, he got 17th All-America, All-Coast tackle that year. His junior year, he had a very severe injury to his leg, and that almost wiped out his football career. It was with him at the time he died. Bob died pretty young. He had an insurance business up in Davis, and had a nice business built up there. He was 39 years old, and I answered the phone one evening about 6 o'clock, and this lady told me my son was dead. That hurt, still does. He had gone out to play tennis. His wife was quite a tennis enthusiast. They had gone out to play tennis that evening, that afternoon late, and they hadn't even started to play. And he had racketed, and they said he threw the ball up and went to hit it, and bang, that he hit. And he didn't have a chance. His heart just blew up. And then after all the physical examinations that he'd had during college and high school and everything else, they found out then that his heart was too small for his body. And the doctor said it just blew up, that's all. He didn't have it.
Can I ask you about something? Were you sheriffs or justice of the peace when they had the jailbreak there you told me about?
Well, For many years, they had the sheriff. For many years, they had the sheriff's office. They covered the whole county. But judicial districts had been formed at that time. The Suisun Judicial District covered all of Suisun, Fairfield, and the surrounding area. I think Dad's area ended out here to Suisun Valley Creek, and north up to Woodin Valley, and east out here to about the Travis Air Force Base. My father was constable for many years. The prior constable, Ansa Burby, old town of Fairfield down there, by a Negro trenching. The old man had, some way, that man had taken his gun away from him and killed him. And they hunted him down back up in the hills, back up here, past Rancho Solano, back over the hills beyond that, and shot him with a rifle. Ended his problem. Dad was made constable at that time by the County Board of Supervisors, and he held that position for a number of elections. That was an elected post for up until the time the whole thing was in court. What do they call it? The lower court now. Handles everything. Handles everything around here. They did away with the constable. The sheriff's office took over that duty. The constable's duties were to be a bailiff in the justice court, and to serve warrants and to arrest. His power was just the same as the sheriff's. But I think they wanted to know something about that Chinese murder out there.
Yes, I think so.
Time?
Oh yeah, we've got time. That was a Chinese massacre. Was it Hatch Ranch?
This happened at the time I was in the university up at
massacre. Was it Hatch Ranch?
This happened at the time I was in the university up in Nevada in 1927. Wong Gi, out on the Hatch Ranch in Suisun Valley. I don't know whether you know where the Hatch Ranch is. You know where Rockville Store is, okay? You know where Rockville Store is, okay? Start north from there and you come to another bridge farther back up there, very narrow bridge. All that area within there was called the Hatch Ranch. This killing that happened was back this way about a half a mile from the bridge and back in toward Suisun Creek, which edges back into that area. I think it was a result of a tongue war myself. That's what I've always thought, because they never could find out exactly what the particular cause was. It certainly had to be. The total stranger to Wong Gi and his family. 13 people were killed out there by that one man. One man. He really slaughtered children, babies, wives, daughters, everything. They got the whole family. That's why I think it was a Tom deal. They used to have those kind of, and blood had hit the moon right there. That's it. They knew no mercy at all. Anyway, this man came in there and he had a rifle that what was it? It didn't have a rear sight on it, and half the breech on it was a plate on the side. That was gone. Then he used a knife too, but he shot some of the members of the family out in the orchard. They used to drive pears out there, take green pears and put them in a big pile all along the row of trees and cover them with straw. And put them in a big pile all along the row of trees and cover them with straw. If you take a green pear and keep it dark, it'll ripen right quick. It don't take very long. Then people would go out there and sort those pears out, put them in boxes. They take them into the cutting shed and cut the pears. Okay. Can't understand, I've never been able to understand how this man could do that shooting out there in the orchard and not make these people at the little community aware of what was going on, but apparently they didn't. But he killed 4 or 5 out there, came in town, and he killed Wong Gi and his wife. His daughter was laying downstairs in a basement room there with a baby, killed the both of them, knife. One little girl was standing alongside this Spanish woman who was cutting pears out in the cutting shed. He cut that kid's throat right in front of her, right there. Cutting shed. He cut that kid's throat right in front of her, right there. It was all the family. He had them all pegged, everyone.
So everyone killed was in the one family then?
Huh?
Everyone killed was in the one family?
Yeah,
They were all
yeah,
family
one
members?
piece family, yeah. And he escaped in an old, I think he had an old Dodge automobile. They caught, and he escaped in an old, I think he had an old Dodge automobile. They caught him up in Nevada City in a chicken house of some kind. He was hiding in it, but they run him down up there. He hung himself before he was executed in San Quentin. San Quentin. Yeah.
Well,
There never was much of that kind of stuff. A lot of people blamed it on the dope. We had a reporter from our local crime sheet had me go out there and show her where these so-called opium dens were. They weren't opium dens at all. This one building was built right on the edge of the creek out there, and they had steps cut in the edge of the creek going down, and this kind of a was underneath, but all exposed to the air. They went down there because it was cooler. It wasn't smoke opium.
mm-hmm.
That was everything was blamed on the yeah. But I tried to explain to her, but she put a big article in the paper about it.
Well, it sounds better when it's about opium than...
They like...
Can I ask you about a story about when you worked at the jail and there was a woman that broke out of the jail?
She tried to break out.
Well,
yeah, she tried to knife me. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I was on duty down at the desk downstairs. They had a booking counter, and then the big steel door going into where the tanks were and going to the upstairs section where the women's ward was upstairs, and that's in the old section of the jail. And things were normal, and all of a sudden I heard this terrible scream, and this terrible scream, and it was Evelyn, Mrs. Lockie. She was a matron at that time. Ernest Lockie, her husband, was the undersheriff. They lived in the apartment upstairs. I dashed up the stairs. There was 3 flights up there in a steel stairway, and just as I got to the top there, this woman came around from this direction over here, and she had on a big long old linen duster and a big old rag tie around her head. She was about 6 feet tall, and just did Evelyn hollered, "Look out, she's got a knife," and just then the woman come back with a knife, grabbed her arm and twisted it, and the knife fell clear downstairs down there. And I wasn't very gentle about taking her back into the room in there, but I didn't hit her or anything like that, but that was the closest I ever came to ever hitting a woman. But she drew back her fist and she let one go there, but I slid off to one. She drew back her fist and she let one go there, but I slid off to one side and it went by my ear. I think she'd have hit me, so tore my head off. But she was mad about something. She was all really tied up in a knot, and when she came down the next day to be taken up down there, she apologized all over the place, and I said, I could have been tough with you, gal. I said, I got to put charges against you for attempted jailbreak and everything. I said, keep you cool a little bit after this. You'll be all right. But stand being around people in trouble, and everything was trouble. At that time, they were just really building Travis Air Force Base. That was in 1945. And Morrison Knudsen was the main big contractor for that. Knudsen was the main big contractor for that. They had a bunch of, on their crew there that were drunk every weekend. They'd make the jail. Every weekend, about 9 or 10 of them every week. You get kind of sick of that kind of stuff, you know.
Sure.
We had a bunch of boys in there.
Sure.
We had a bunch of boys in there. One time when I was in the probation office, we had no juvenile detention home at that time. This was against the law, too, to put a youth in the jail, but we had nothing else. We had to clean out what we called the drunk tank. We had to clean out what we called the drunk tank, clean them out and put them in other cells and everything. I had 20 boys in there. 20.
That's not a very big area either.
Well, at that time, and during the war, World War II, Indians had recruited 16-year-olds from all over the United States to come out here and work on Mare Island as helpers. Most of them were troublemakers where they got them. And we had no jurisdiction over them at all. And a juvenile in California, if you arrest a juvenile, you have to take him to the jurisdiction of his own residence. And there were so many of those that every once in a while during the year, the youth authority would gather all them together from all over the state, together from all over the state and send a whole trainload of them back east, back to where their place of legal residence. But that, like I say, a lot of them were troublemakers where they came from. One of them ended in San Quentin prison. We felt that we couldn't handle him. He had put some bars of soap in a sack and slugged a couple of sailors down on the lower part of Georgia Street in Vallejo there. Seriously injured one of them pretty badly. He was a juvenile, and they certified him to juvenile court. Well, I put him up in the tank there at the jail. That night, they made a racket in there and attracted the night jailer. And he, like a fool, went in there instead of getting some help. You know, he went in there, and this same guy sacked him in the head with a sack with soap in it, knocked him cold. And we had a great time rounding them up. There was a whole bunch of them left. No, I'll take that back. There were 4 of them that wouldn't go.
Go with them.
There were 4 of them that wouldn't go.
You had some sense.
We got them all by about 10 o'clock the next morning. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I think we're.
The next morning. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I think we're just about out of time. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Oliver?
Not yet.
Do you have some?
I would
Not
like
yet?
to recall one thing.
Yeah.
When I was about 9 years old. I don't know whether it was about 9 years old. I don't know whether you remember it in history or not. During World War I, there was a terrific Spanish influenza attack all over the United States. In fact, it killed more people from influenza than we lost. In World War I over there. Us kids had to wear masks all the time, going to school, in school, and all. And we'd have a sack with
Camphor?
camphor around our throat. They tried all kinds of things to keep us from getting down. And soon had a camphor tree in his front yard, and we'd go by and take the leaves of those things and breathe them. Think maybe that would keep us from getting crazy. But that's how panicky people were. Yeah. I'd like to talk to you some more.
Boy.
If any of you would like to come time, and I'd be glad to.
Would you consider coming back and visiting us again?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah.
we'd sure appreciate it.
If they think up some more questions, well, I'd like
Okay,
to-
thanks for coming in.